It took less than 8 seconds for the room to change. Not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't. The interviewer had asked a harmless question, the kind designed to prompt nostalgia, a safe reflection on a film that had long since become a cultural artifact. And then his name entered the air between them. Dakota Johnson didn't recoil. She didn't smile politely and pivot. She paused. A fractional hesitation. A breath that lingered a beat too long. And in that suspended second, millions of viewers leaning into their screens felt it. Something unfinished had just surfaced. When the clip later spread across social media, it wasn't the words that people replayed. It was the silence before them. The way her shoulders subtly tightened. The way her gaze dropped, not in embarrassment, but in recollection. The faint exhale that sounded less like nerves and more like memory pressing against restraint. And then she said it, measured, controlled, almost dangerously calm, that some connections don't end simply because circumstances demand they do. That was the detonator. Within hours, timelines were flooded with slowed-down edits, zoomed-in glances, decade-old red carpet clips resurrected like evidence in a reopened case. And at the center of it all stood one name the public had never truly stopped associating with hers, Jamie Dornan. But here is where the narrative most people are telling you collapses. This was never a simple story about lingering romance. It was never about a secret affair or forbidden longing. That's the version designed for tabloids and trending hashtags. The truth is more complex, more uncomfortable, and far more revealing about how power actually operates inside Hollywood's most intense machine. To understand what really shifted in that interview chair, you have to go back to 2013, not to the premiere, not to the global frenzy, but to the casting room. Before the headlines, before the fandoms, before the mythology. When 50 Shades of Grey was first taking shape, it was already burdened with expectation. Adapted from a publishing phenomenon, scrutinized before cameras even rolled, it promised notoriety more than prestige. Careers could be launched by it. Careers could be permanently defined by it. And the studio knew that chemistry would not just be desirable, it would be weaponized. Because chemistry sells. And chemistry is dangerous. Dakota entered that world young, sharp, observant. She wasn't naive. She understood legacy. Being the daughter of Hollywood royalty meant she'd grown up watching how the industry constructs narratives and then traps people inside them. Jamie entered from a different direction, already respected, already carrying the steadiness of a man conscious of the image he projected. Married. A father. Grounded publicly in stability. On paper, it was safe casting. On screen, it was combustible. Crew members would later hint, carefully, diplomatically, that rehearsals were minimal. That trust established itself unnervingly fast. That scenes requiring extreme vulnerability felt less technical and more intuitive. And this is where most audiences misread the dynamic. They assume intimacy equals attraction. But intimacy on that level, sustained, performative, repeated for months under lights and instruction, creates something stranger than desire. It creates imprinting. When two actors are required to simulate emotional exposure at that intensity, day after day, their nervous systems begin to associate one another with heightened states. Adrenaline, anticipation, relief, trust. It is a biochemical loop masquerading as fiction. And the body does not always distinguish between staged vulnerability and authentic connection. That is the first layer of the story. The second layer is power. Hollywood does not simply produce films. It manufactures mythologies around the people inside them. The marketing for 50 Shades did not center on plot. It centered on tension, not just between characters, but between actors. Interviews were structured to tease. Press tours were orchestrated to provoke speculation. Photographers were positioned to capture proximity. Silence was cultivated strategically, because ambiguity sustains attention. And attention is currency. As rumors inevitably began to circulate, neither of them fed the machine. No flirtatious oversharing. No provocative confessions. Instead, they constructed walls. Carefully. Consistently. Public respect. Professional admiration. Nothing more. But restraint is its own language. Every time they appeared together, viewers leaned in harder precisely because nothing explicit was offered. The absence became the intrigue. And over time, that intrigue calcified into belief. A decade-long assumption that something real had existed just beneath the scripted lines. Here's the question no one was asking then. Who benefits from that ambiguity? Studios benefit. Media outlets benefit. Fan commune. Fan communities thrive on it. But the individuals inside that speculation? They pay a quieter cost. Because when audiences project a narrative onto you long enough, disentangling yourself from it becomes almost impossible without disappointing someone. Dakota moved into other roles. Smaller films. Bolder risks. Projects that demanded she be seen outside the shadow of Anastasia Steele. Jamie recalibrated his trajectory as well, choosing parts that distanced him from Christian Grey's dominance and redirected attention to his range. On the surface, both succeeded. Yet every interview, every retrospective question dragged the past forward again. Do you still talk? Was it hard to let go? Did you fall for each other? The same inquiry repackaged endlessly. And each time, they answered with the same calibrated balance, warmth without confession, respect without revelation. Until now, what made this recent moment explosive was not romance. It was timing. Dakota is no longer the emerging actress navigating a franchise's shadow. She is established, self-possessed, known for blunt honesty delivered with unnerving composure. When she chooses to articulate something emotional now, it carries authority rather than naivety. So when she implied that love does not require possession, that understanding someone deeply can become part of who you are, it landed differently. Not as gossip, as philosophy. And that is precisely why it unsettled people. Because if she had framed it as lost love, the public could categorize it neatly. Tragic, unfulfilled, romantic. Instead, she described something more durable and less convenient: connection without ownership, affection without agenda, a bond that survives without demanding transformation into a relationship. That reframes everything. It challenges the assumption that emotional intensity must culminate in either romance or a rupture. It suggests that two adults can carry an imprint of each other without destabilizing their present lives. But here's where the tension deepens. Silence followed from his side. For days, nothing. No social media clarification. No press rebuttal. Photographs surfaced of him walking calmly through Belfast streets, expression unreadable. And silence, in the age of instant reaction, is rarely accidental. It creates vacuum. And vacuums pull attention inward. Speculation swelled. Was he uncomfortable? Was he protecting something? Was he honoring something? When he finally appeared publicly, not to address it directly, but inevitably, the question arrived with surgical politeness. Had he seen her words? His smile lasted a fraction longer than expected. Controlled, thoughtful, and then he acknowledged what they had shared as unique. Unrepeatable, something you carry. Notice what he did not say. He did not escalate. He did not deny. He did not dramatize. He mirrored her restraint almost precisely. And that symmetry is the real revelation. Two people, 10 years later, articulating the same truth without crossing into spectacle. In an industry that feeds on oversharing, they offered alignment without exhibition. That is power. Not the loud, headline-grabbing kind. The quieter form. The kind that refuses to let public demand dictate private definition. Because here's the uncomfortable angle beneath the sentimentality. The public wanted a love story. They still do. A narrative where timing was wrong but feelings were eternal. A script tidy enough to edit into montages set to swelling music. But what if the story is more radical than that? What if what they're modeling is emotional maturity in a space that rarely rewards it? Consider the risk for him. Married. A father. Any exaggerated affirmation could spiral into unnecessary scrutiny of his family life. Consider the risk for her. Any overt declaration could reduce her to a decade-old role she has worked deliberately to transcend. So they chose precision. And precision, paradoxically, made the moment louder. Because when audiences sense authenticity restrained rather than performed, they lean closer. They dissect micro-expressions. They analyze cadence. They project longing into neutral pauses. This is where power dynamics invert. For years, the narrative around them was externally imposed. Now, they are subtly reclaiming authorship, not by exposing secrets, by redefining the frame. Love does not have to culminate in union to be real. Connection does not require consummation to endure. And perhaps most provocatively, closure is not always necessary for peace. That is what unsettled people. It forces a confrontation with the idea that some relationships shape us permanently without ever becoming ours. That timing can redirect lives without invalidating what was felt. That maturity sometimes looks like choosing not to destabilize something sacred just to satisfy curiosity. By the end of that week, headlines had exhausted themselves trying to crystallize what was at it. Core, intentionally fluid. Social media declared confessions. Think pieces debated emotional infidelity versus platonic reverence. Fans stitched together old behind-the-scenes footage as though solving a mystery that was never meant to be solved. And through it all, both remained composed. Which brings us to the deeper question one few are asking yet: why now? Why allow that degree of vulnerability to surface a decade later? Because timing changes meaning. 10 years ago, such words would have ignited scandal. Now, they signal evolution. They demonstrate that distance can refine memory rather than distort it. They suggest that adulthood allows you to honor what was without threatening what is. But there is another layer still. In an era where celebrity narratives are increasingly curated for relatability, authenticity becomes strategic capital. Vulnerability, when deployed carefully, strengthens brand perception. It reframes past controversy as growth. It invites empathy rather than intrusion. Does that diminish the sincerity? Not necessarily, but it complicates it. The most compelling truths in Hollywood often operate in duality, emotionally real and publicly advantageous simultaneously. So when Dakota spoke, she may have been expressing something deeply personal. She was also, consciously or not, reclaiming a narrative long shaped by others. And when Jamie responded, matching tone for tone, he did the same. The result is not a rekindled romance. It is something subtler, two careers momentarily intersecting again on their own terms. The public will continue to romanticize it. That is inevitable. But what makes this story endure is not fantasy. It is restraint. Because in a culture addicted to spectacle, choosing not to overshare is an act of defiance. And that is only the surface. What remains unexamined, and what Part 2 will confront directly, is how that original film altered the psychological architecture of both their lives. How portraying dominance and submission under global scrutiny reshaped public perception of their identities. How the weight of erotic mythology clung to them long after the cameras stopped rolling. And how carrying that shared imprint may have influenced every relationship, every role, every decision that followed. The interview was not an ending. It was a crack in a decade-old facade. And what lies behind that facade is far more complex than a love story. The most dangerous roles are not the ones that fail. They are the ones that succeed too loudly. When 50 Shades of Grey exploded onto cinema screens, it did not simply perform well, it detonated. The box office numbers were staggering, the discourse was relentless, and within weeks the film had embedded itself into pop culture as shorthand for erotic intensity. But while audiences debated its themes and critics dissected its craft, something quieter and far more consequential was unfolding behind the scenes. Because when a film becomes a global phenomenon, the actors inside it stop being individuals and start becoming symbols. Dakota Johnson was no longer just an actress navigating her 20s. She became a projection screen for fantasies, criticisms, feminist debates, moral outrage, and tabloid obsession. Jamie Dornan was no longer simply a performer with range. He became an archetype, dominance personified, scrutinized for whether the man matched the myth. And here is the truth few acknowledge. When you portray intimacy at that scale, the world begins to believe they are entitled to your real one. The trilogy did not just demand physical vulnerability. It demanded emotional simulation under microscopic observation. The scenes were choreographed, yes, carefully structured with contracts, protocols, boundaries. But repetition blurs edges. Day after day, week after week, recreating heightened intimacy conditions the body and mind in ways that linger long after rap is called. Neuroscientists will tell you that the brain forms associative bonds through repeated emotional activation. Actors call it chemistry. Psychologists might call it imprinting. Imagine standing opposite the same person for months while your nervous system cycles through adrenaline, anticipation, release. Imagine trusting them not only with performance cues, but with physical proximity in scenes designed to push comfort zones. That kind of exposure does not evaporate when the director yells cut. It embeds. Now add the external pressure. The press tour was a masterclass in controlled provocation. Interviews were engineered to tease tension. Reporters probed for off-screen sparks. Body language was dissected in real time by online audiences. Every glance became evidence. Every pause became subtext. The marketing machine understood something primal. Audiences crave the illusion that what they witness on screen bleeds into reality. So the question is not whether there was connection. Of course there was. The question is what happens when that connection becomes a commodity. Power shifted. Studios held leverage. Publicists curated proximity. Contracts likely contained behavioral clauses about appearances and messaging. Meanwhile, both actors had to navigate the paradox of selling intensity without fueling scandal. For him, there was an additional layer. He was already married. Stability at home contrasted sharply with fantasy on screen. The tighter he held to public restraint, the more audiences leaned in searching for cracks. For her, the challenge was different but equally precarious. As a young actress stepping into a role defined by submission, she faced a cultural landscape eager to conflate character with person. Critics questioned her agency. Commentators speculated about empowerment versus exploitation. And beneath it all lingered an unspoken assumption. If the chemistry felt real, perhaps it was. This is where psychological complexity deepens. When two people share a high-intensity professional experience that alters their trajectories permanently, they become part of each other's origin story. No matter what comes after, the breakthrough is shared. The before and after is shared. They are witnesses to a transformation few others truly understand. That creates what psychologists sometimes call situational intimacy, closeness forged through extreme circumstance rather than traditional romance. It is potent. It is destabilizing. And it is often misinterpreted by outsiders who prefer simpler narratives. As sequels followed, scrutiny intensified. On-screen dominance became cultural shorthand for his identity. Interviews often nudged him toward clarifying that he did not live like Christian Grey. Yet the more he distanced himself verbally, the more the character clung visually. Meanwhile, she began to pivot toward roles that subverted expectation, darker comedies, indie dramas, projects that showcased irony and detachment rather than vulnerability. Was that coincidence? Or recalibration? Because here is the long-term consequence of embodying erotic mythology: audiences struggle to let you evolve. They freeze you in the frame that first electrified them. Over time, subtle distance grew, not hostility, not rupture, but the natural space required for reinvention. They appeared together when contracts demanded it. They spoke warmly, carefully. They maintained alignment publicly without feeding fantasy. And the imprint remained. Watch old interviews closely and you notice something almost imperceptible: a shared shorthand. A glance that registers as recognition rather than flirtation. Micro-expressions that suggest memory rather than desire. The public read romance into it because romance is the simplest explanation for intensity. But intensity born of shared pressure can mimic love without requiring it. Then came the years of separation. Different projects, different geographies, different personal chapters. Silence around each other became normal. The franchise slipped gradually from headline dominance into nostalgic reference. But psychological imprints do not dissolve on schedule. The body remembers environments of heightened experience. The mind recalls who stood opposite you when your life pivoted irreversibly. That does not equate to longing. It equates to significance. Which brings us back to the present moment, to that interview pause that reignited everything. Why did it resonate so fiercely? Because audiences subconsciously recognize unresolved narrative tension. They sense when something meaningful was never theatrically concluded. There was no scandal, no betrayal, no public fallout to package the story neatly. Just distance. And distance without drama leaves space for imagination to thrive. Yet beneath the viral edits and romantic captions lies a more nuanced truth about power and restraint. He had more to lose publicly from any perceived emotional confession. Marriage alters optics. Fatherhood intensifies scrutiny. Even the suggestion of enduring attachment outside those boundaries can spiral into narratives neither party intends. So when he eventually responded, measured, sincere, carefully bounded, he demonstrated something far more revealing than hidden passion. He demonstrated control. Control over tone. Control over interpretation. Control over the boundary between appreciation and implication. And she mirrored it. That mirroring is not accidental. It suggests alignment in understanding how fragile the line is between authenticity and spectacle. They know the machine they once stood inside. They know how quickly a sentence can be extracted from context and inflated into scandal. So what did they actually do? They reframed the bond as formative rather than forbidden, as influential rather than romantic, as permanent without being possessive. This is a mature narrative. But maturity is less clickable than fantasy, so audiences instinctively re-romanticize it. Here is where the long-term impact becomes fascinating. Actors often speak about chemistry reads, that unteachable spark producers chase obsessively. But what if chemistry is less about attraction and more about nervous systems synchronizing under pressure? What if the reason their dynamic felt rare was because both were navigating vulnerability in parallel, trusting each other in an environment that could easily have become uncomfortable or exploitative? Trust builds attachment. Attachment builds memory. Memory builds myth. The myth then feeds back into public perception, amplifying what may have begun as simple professional reliance. Over a decade, that myth matured. Fans who were teenagers when the first film premiered are now adults. They revisit those scenes with nostalgia layered over longing. The actors themselves are older, steadier, more self-assured. So when she articulates that love can exist without being together, it aligns not with fantasy but with growth. And growth